Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to the Cultural Studies Podcast. My name is Toby Miller, and my guest today is.
Farooq Sulehria. I teach at Beacon House National University, Lahore, and well, I am an academic by profession. I am a journalist as well by passion, I would say. And yes, I don't know I don't have much to say about me. I divide my time between Pakistan and Sweden. I live actually in Stockholm. My family lives there. I have a daughter. She's 16 years old, Bella, and my partner, Sahar. She's a preschool teacher. And I work here in Lahore, Pakistan. Lahore is second largest town in Pakistan and seen as a cultural center of Lahore as well.
Well, it's great to see you, old friend. I was thinking about this. I think we met maybe, well, over a decade ago. And I've known you, although only tangentially in several different contexts, as a scholar, as a journalist, as an editor, and so on, and in different places. So it's a great pleasure that you've agreed to chat today. And I wanted to begin by asking a rather obvious question during this appalling conjuncture. What is currently dynamizing, interesting, impeding, concerning you? What's happening?
Well, right now, very much occupied with a lot of writings and interviews and some thinking process about the recent war-like situation between India and Pakistan.
Hmm.
This war was unlike the previous wars we were having in last about 4 decades. Previously, the war was usually fought between the two countries in Jammu and Kashmir, which is seen as a disputed territory, hence it is not seen as a international war between two countries. This time, after 1971, India started firing missiles on Pakistan and vice versa on major cities, including Lahore and Karachi here, and capital city or the twin city Rawalpindi of capital. Likewise, Pakistan was firing at some of their major cities. This was really traumatic, I would say. But also, me and my students, when the university reopened, I spoke to them. We were thinking about Gaza all the time as well. I mean, we were just into a small skirmish, I would say, between the two countries, and we were pretty scared, pretty upset. Well, beyond that, I mean, I am a university teacher. There is always a lot of research work going on, some academic writing going on, but also I edit a daily online Urdu language newspaper, which is a progressive newspaper called Jidojahad, Struggle in English. And also, because of my journalistic background, I actually worked with some mainstream dailies here in Lahore back in the 1990s before I moved to Sweden. So this passion remains there, and given the technological changes that have occurred, also the fact that I teach media, I started a YouTube channel as well. So I now enjoy my recordings at the university studio. I look forward to that. I think I'm improving at that as well. Well, then there is family. I try to spend my time with my daughter and my partner when I'm back in Stockholm. So these are the usual things. Most of the time, what most of the university people do, I do the same as well.
But in addition to being a teacher and a journalist, you're also very much a scholar, and you published a very notable and important book, which unusually brings together Pakistan and India, which are sometimes clumped together as South Asia, especially in the United States, as you know, whereas the British like to call it the subcontinent. I love these terms. And of course, Sri Lanka is tacked onto this somehow, right? But you brought together Pakistan and India in your media imperialism work. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, about bracketing these places.
Could you point it out, Toby? Because many people actually do not understand the importance of it. Fact of the matter is, when I started this book is derived from my PhD research. My dissertation was about media imperialism in India and Pakistan. I actually wanted to include Bangladesh in it as well, but my supervisor, Professor Jilbar Ashkar, he intervened. Like any good supervisor, he thought, "Oh, Farooq, this is too ambitious. You can't do it." Honestly, I appreciate his advice because dealing with two case studies became too much for a PhD project. However, it was very illogical, I would say. I wanted to include all these three countries, but India and Pakistan, because usually they are seen as rivals, as antagonists, whatever. All over the world, there is a picture of India and Pakistan perpetually fighting each other. So beyond the research work, I also had great time in New Delhi and some other towns of India. And on my return, on coming back to Pakistan after spending 6 months, I wrote a newspaper article. I used to write an op-ed for the news, which is the largest, one of the largest dailies here, or used to be the largest daily here in Pakistan. It was titled something like "To be a Pakistani in India" or something like that.
Hmm.
It went viral in both countries. There was number of anecdotes, and to this day, I tell people in Pakistan, look, I've been to few countries in the region, in South Asia, including Afghanistan, where people really hate you, and some European countries and the neighboring countries of Pakistan. The only country where being Pakistani, you get lot of attention, lot of respect, lot of love. It's India. So I think it was very good experience. Likewise, I think it is important. My second book, which was an edited work on Pakistani media, here, I had this impression, this kind of ideological motivation that all the four provinces will be represented. Because usually, when books are published about Pakistan by Pakistani scholars, they are very, sort of, there is a metropolitan periphery divide in Pakistan. So, people who have studied in fine Ivy League type universities, Oxbridge, they dominate the academia here in Pakistan. They are invited by international authors to contribute book chapters and so on. So I tried to reach universities all over the four provinces and I
Mm.
managed it. And likewise, my next book, where we are also collaborating, there is a chapter from Israel, someone who does not support the Zionist project there, who is opposed to a Gaza war, but having a chapter on Israel by an Israeli academic in a book being edited by someone living in Pakistan, I thought it would be a big statement against Zionism as well as anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism is very ripe in this country, and understandably, one can understand it, but still. So I think every time there is my scholarly work, uh, I avoid using these hi-fi terminologies, but well, whatever it is, I also try to, bring in some sort of ecological aspect to it as well. It should be a statement. Also, I'm very happy about the next project because all these continents in the world, they are represented in this book because this book is about media sub-imperialisms.
Now, when you use the term media imperialism about Pakistan and India, what is the empire that we're talking about?
Well, in this case, of course, I mean, the way I conceptualized, and this was not my own conceptualization of imperialism in the 21st century, it was rather my supervisor's conceptualization, where he views empire as, sort of global north, where the USA, okay, with Trump, we don't know what's going to happen. USA being the, feudal lord with vassals around it, such as some European countries, Australia, Japan. So put together, they constitute the empire. And within that empire, of course, the USA is the dominant force, the kind of, the actual overlord, you can say.
Hmm.
And then there is this periphery, large part of the world. Uh, Pakistan constitutes a typical periphery. And few countries that we can, consider as sub-imperial, such as India. India constitutes as sub-imperial. Okay, there is another term, semi-periphery, which I do not really buy very much. I think that's more, but that's a separate debate. However, I think this is how the present global hierarchy exists in political, economic, as well as cultural terms, which is, your topic as well. And let me also point out it was during my MBA days when I was really irritated by some of the readings. It was your work which helped me stay the course, I would say. In a way, I was irritated, and in a way, that irritation gave me motivation to research on media imperialism. And some of the people who really sort of gave me courage to go for it included you, Professor Boyd Barrett, I would say Lee Arts, his co-author Yayak Malipur, because when I went to university, usually it was thought, media imperialism is over, and that kind of discourse was dominating media studies at my university.
Absolutely. And I think it's still a struggle to get it thought about seriously, though, of course, things have changed. One of the great expressions about Latin America, which I keep thinking I read in the work of Octavio Paz, but I can never find it. So perhaps I'm inventing it myself, or somebody else said it, was that a place like Latin America, because of its unique imperial history, by contrast with much of Asia and Africa, so many hundreds of years earlier, different migration patterns, different colonial projects, is of the West, but always on its periphery. In the case of Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, the British were there for a very long time, by contrast with Africa. They were there really as long as they were in somewhere like Australia or New Zealand, Aotearoa. And yet their importance, for example, in the current conjuncture, is minimal if it's existing at all. The only person in Britain writing anything about this is Tariq Ali, it seems to me. Is that right to say that despite 200 years of domination, in inverted commas, the British really don't mean very much anymore?
Well, this is hard to say. Economically, perhaps yes. Their economic influence has vanished, but not culturally. Even today, the elite would love to send their children for going to studies Oxford and Cambridge, else perhaps LSE or UCL, etc., etc. Ivy League comes after Oxbridge, even today, because even today, uh, for instance, in Pakistan, we have HSN College, where all the traditional families, the so-called feudal lord families, there is, a debate whether we have feudalism in Pakistan or not. Or we have St. Stephen's in New Delhi or Delhi, where still the traditional aristocratic, again, quote unquote, class sent their children. For
Right.
instance, our former Prime Minister Imran Khan, who went to HSN College and later on Oxford, previously Benazir. She went to a convert school here, then Oxford. And, I wouldn't understand these things before. In his cabinet, in Imran Khan's cabinet, most of his ministers were both HSN and Oxford or Cambridge. And I only, having lived few years in London, I did my MA and PhD there. I started realizing these things, how these networks really work. They are already built during school days. They continue during the university days. And I would like to quote Asma Jahangir, the late Asma Jahangir. She was very noted woman activist, internationally recognized as well. Once I remember she came to Stockholm to receive what we call alternative Nobel, and I happened to meet her. We knew each other for many years, and I started telling her about my impressions that I gathered from London, how the bourgeoisie from India and Pakistan, especially, they and their children rub shoulders, and she, being very informed because she belonged to a kind of upper class in Pakistan and
Mm,
rubbing
mm.
shoulders with bourgeoisie in so-called Indian subcontinent. She laughed and she said, well, at the time, USA was still occupying Afghanistan. And I also pointed out, look, I, my partner is from Afghanistan and I used to go a lot there. And I pointed out, look, the British prince was there. He was, quite nice. I never hear British soldiers getting killed in Afghanistan. At best, it is the friendly fire from the USA, which has cost some British lives. Unfortunate. But usually it's American soldiers or some other soldiers who get killed. And she laughed and she said, look, the Americans are just, idiots in front of the Brits. That these were her comments. So I think still the cultural influence,
Yeah.
the military links, even today, the top uh, cadet in the Pakistan Military Academy is sent to Sandhurst. And to be, I have some background, family background. My father was in Air Force, elder brother, many cousins, they were in military or Air Force. So, I learned this word as a child that, the best officer comes out of Sandhurst.
Comes
So
off
this
Sandhurst.
cultural military and
And you
yeah.
mentioned Benazir Bhutto, Imran Khan. I mentioned Tariq Ali, all from the oligarchy, although in Tariq Ali's case, a leftist oligarchy, a leftist fraction of the oligarchy. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt here. All three happen to be class fellows in a way. Tariq was a year senior, very close friend all the time. Benazir in her exile, she was rubbing shoulder with Tariq Ali. I've translated Tariq Ali, three of his books, and for many years we had very good contact with each other. Um, he's an inspiration for many of us in Pakistan and globally, no doubt. Despite some disagreements of late with him, especially his support for Imran Khan was very problematic for some of us. Anyway, and he gave an interview to a newspaper here where he states that Imran Khan was his close friend, and in fact he met Tariq Ali when he retired from cricket and sought his advice. What should I do? Because my career is ending. I have a long life ahead of me. And Imran was thinking of joining politics. And Tariq Ali advised him to join film industry so that we have a better heroes in Pakistan. So we have, so even like these three are very different people, Benazir,
Yeah.
Imran Khan, Tariq Ali, all globally known in different ways, but happen to be class fellows at Oxford, and they, at least Imran Khan, Tariq Ali, they lived close by, not far away. Even here, their families would know each other.
This is something that happens all over the world, but I think it's really worth mentioning it because people forget about the interlocking directorates, formal and informal, of elites. That brings me on to the inevitable question about Imran Khan, who, like Tariq Ali, very good-looking guy, you can imagine his being, or either of them being movie stars. But he's seen as having made a move against secularism in favor of sectarianism, with the supposed profundization of his commitment to a particular version of Islam. And that makes me ask the boring outsider question of you, not about Imran Khan, but about Pakistan and India. How much of the current conflict has anything to do with religion? Is it relevant? Are the tensions very relevant, given that we know there are millions of Muslims in India, for example?
Do you mean the conflict between India and Pakistan?
Yeah.
Well, Islam or religion on both sides is used as a pretext. There are other kind of interests, definitely. I would say there was sort of, a conspiracy of logic. I won't say there was a conspiracy. The two ruling classes really sat in a room to decide, okay, you attack Palgam and we will start a war. But, a connivance somehow by the logic of things. This is what I would say. Both needed war. Both have benefited from the war. Islam, of course, or Islamophobia is the mainstay of BJP politics. This is where he gets the support. And unfortunately, before the war, even the two communist parties, they were supporting Modi's war effort. So much was the war hysteria in India created by BJP, by the hegemonic hold of the BJP over the Indian society, unfortunately. Likewise, On this side, well, religion was actually not used at all by the Pakistani state. They would rather use nationalism, countering, a big uh, unfriendly neighbor who always wants to destroy Pakistan. India is actually, the other of Pakistan in
Mm.
the imagination of this imagined community. However, the religious color is given. Of course, India is Hindu, regardless of the fact that there are perhaps more Muslims in India than Pakistan. So, but again, Kashmir is given a religious color by Pakistan, not by India. So it's a bit complicated. But the people of Jammu and Kashmir, perhaps a majority doesn't want this as part of the religion, as part of their struggle. Well, there can be small sections, even in Pakistan, the religious fundamentalists who see it as a religious war. But I think, especially this conflict, it wasn't really given the religious color. The Indian side would call it war on terror, and Pakistan as a sort of, victim of a big neighbor who wants to destroy it.
I noticed that communist parties in India took a nationalist line on this.
That's very true. Actually, you have at least three or two big communist parties. There is alliance of four communist parties, two smaller ones, Communist Party of CPIML Liberation, and then there is Forward Bloc as well. They used to have some bases in West Bengal. CPIML Liberation has bases in Bihar and another province, Rajasthan, here and there a little bit as well. However, CPI, Communist Party of India, and CPM, which ruled West Bengal for 3 decades, Tripura for about 3 decades, Kerala still they are ruling. So they have mass bases in some parts of India.
Yeah.
And historically, unfortunately, both parties took a very unfortunate position. They supported a Modi regime. I would call it regime also because, this is a majoritarian government. It's not democratic in the real sense of liberal democracy, I would say. So that was really unfortunate. That I would say was a reenactment of Second International just before the First
Yeah,
World War.
no, you bet. I'm wondering, Farooq, whether one might also ask about the status of Hindutva, RSS, the Modi regime. You called it a regime. You're saying it's majoritarian, not democratic. I think one could be saying the same about the Republican Party in the United States. But you criticize attempts to call it a fascist party, Modi. Could you tell us a bit about that? Why is it not a fascist party?
Well, I think I will point out two debates here. One, there was a debate between two former general secretaries of CPM, Prakash Karat. He was succeeded by Sitaram Yachuri, who was a very popular parliamentarian from West Bengal. He replaced Prakash Karat as a general secretary, and the two had a public debate in a mainstream Indian newspaper whether BJP is fascist or not. So in that debate, Prakash Karat was arguing that it is not fascist. Then another very important debate between, say, um, Achin Vinayak, who is a noted academic and retired from Delhi University, and he has written a book on BJP. He's also a Marxist, but belonging to a small group in India with more sort of Trotskyist leanings. Then Ashish Nandi and others who are more sort of subaltern and stuff like post-colonial type. Well, in both debates, I think the argument offered by Achin Vinayak is more convincing for me. I stand there. My understanding is that, fascism has to be understood with its locality as well, with its imperial location.
Mm-hmm.
India is not an imperial country. Fascism is outrightly an ultra-national but also imperialistic project. And it was, part of the history. It's not that kind of reenactment of fascism, even in the USA. That's why a lot of debates, whether it is neo-fascism, whether it is post-fascism, so on and so forth. So, I mean, even these debates can be a bit relevant to India. But in my view, I think in agreement with Ernest Mandel, the Belgian economist, who also wrote a lot on fascism, what is very important to understand the link between imperialism from economic, political, cultural viewpoint and fascism. That's why I think we have to be careful about this. And the best work I can recommend is Achin Vinay, where I agree. Definitely the debate between Prakash Karat and Sitaram Yechury was also very interesting.
Now, moving on to Pakistan, if we could, and your take there. You're a prolific writer on Pakistan-India relations, but on all sorts of other theoretical and political matters. On Pakistan, sometimes people on the soft left, the social democratic left in the global north, think of the military in Pakistan as a civilizing influence, rather the way they think about the military in Turkey, that this is a relatively secular entity that manages the extremes of religion on the part of Erdogan in Turkey or Imran in Pakistan. And frequently, the army generals who become presidents in Pakistan are very eloquent speakers of English. They come from this elite. They know how to manipulate the New York Times or the Guardian or the BBC. Give me your take on what I've just said.
Unfortunately, this is really flawed picture of Pakistan military.
Right.
I would say the real Taliban are not the Taliban ruling Afghanistan or those organized as TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, Taliban Movement Pakistan in English, or a lot of other religious parties. The real Taliban, the real, the fundamentalist project is now Pakistan military itself. The problem here is also we can't research really on military. The other problem is I have to self-censor here myself as well. But if you look at and the huge change happened in the 1980s under the Zia dictatorship. Military used to have a liberal lifestyle, but a sort of conservative outlook, a, a continuity of the British tradition. The lifestyle, like my father who was in Air Force, he used to tell, still he's around, and he tells us how until 1960s at dinner red wine was served. Okay, if you don't drink, you don't have to. And a friend of mine who joined Air Force in the 90s, he told me about a tradition at the Air Force Academy. They would still cheers to the Queen at certain, dinner, although the red wine was not served. It was a local red drink, soft drink. Anyway, so the lifestyle were liberal, but then you have, huge penetration of the religious fundamentalist forces, a total makeover of the military syllabus, military indoctrination at the military academy. If you meet the Pakistani officers, crop and soldiers, you won't find any ideological difference. Just the other day, I wrote a style piece in Urdu actually, and I pointed out how the graduates of madrasa, the Islamic schools, and the graduates of PMA, Pakistan Military Academy, they only differ in English medium, being the language of the teaching, and their uniform. Madrasa students have, shalwar kameez, and they wear the Western dress. So this is very flawed picture, very, problematic as well. As a matter of fact, military is the main bulwark of Islamic fundamentalism in Pakistan.
And the ISI is important too, right?
Well, ISI is important, but this has to be understood in the context that military itself is important, and this state is actually what we call a praetorian state or a garrison state or an overdeveloped state, two, three different concepts that have been applied. But in every academic concept, you will find military as the dominating force. So, the strength of ISI or the strength of this general or that general has to be understood in the context of the fact that the nature of the state, the character of the state is that of Praetorian state, garrison state.
Yeah.
And also, just a small point, I'm no expert on Turkey. It interests me, of course, but one of my PhD class fellows, we had the same supervisor as well. He remains one of my good friends. He wrote a book on actually Islamic fundament, AKP, Erdogan's party. And I have read his book and I stay in touch with him. I invite him for lectures to my student. So he also looks at the hypocrisy of the Kemalist project from the start. It
Yeah.
wasn't a secular project. And also, I think, just give me one more moment in the context of Muslim world. This is very important. I see a lot of academic and journalistic discourses appearing in the West, where people like Bhutto, Benazir, they are, or dictators such as Saddam or Kemal Ataturk himself, Gaddafi at one time. They are presented as, or Assad regime at one time, as secularists. In my view, you cannot have secularism without at least liberal democracy. So this is very important. Kemalism was not secular because it wasn't, democracy. And they used religion the way Stalin at one time did, or many dictatorships of different kind in the world. They exploited religion. They were not secular.
No, I appreciate your saying that very much. I have this set of male heroes of a particular kind of developmentalism in the 20th century. And Ataturk is on the fringes only, but people like Nasser, Nehru, Cardenas here in Mexico, Jinnah, actually, in a certain sense, whom I regard as people who, whatever their religious beliefs may have been, whatever their views of Marxism may have been, tried to get some sort of modernity for their people against the yoke of empire, be it a yoke that had been thrown off sometime before, in the case of the Spanish, or that was still there in some ways in the case of the British and the French. But of course, these were people of their times, deeply flawed. And one of the interesting stories about Cardenas is that when Trotsky was seeking asylum here in Mexico, the Communist Party here was Stalinist and lobbied Cardenas not to admit him. Roosevelt was the US president, lobbied Cardenas not to admit him. And Cardenas took one of those statesman-like positions, which is fuck Stalin, right? And let Trotsky in. Now, of course, it all ended in tears. But these men had their moments, it seems to me, when they sought to rise above their circumstances. And that's why I remain a bit of a fanboy. But I don't see anybody like that in the current conjuncture who can rise above the issues of the day to think more broadly about the condition of the people. Anyway, enough of that. I guess my next question for you was about the place of Marxism in your thinking.
Well, this is always a very loaded question. I've been denied at least two times jobs on the pretext that I am a Marxist, at least at two universities. Once they explicitly told me after the interview. Anyway, well, there are two kind of, I would say, explanations required here. Yes, I'm very proudly a Marxist. I try to research, I try to do journalism, activism with a view of what I call critical Marxism. I mean, if I find Marx wrong somewhere, argumentatively, I would say it. I would not deny it. I think that kind of criticality is required. I belong to that tradition of Marxism, and there is no one Marxism. There are many Marxisms. There are many people who have inspired me in my Marxist understanding and thinking. However, when I do my research, again, deploying oftentimes Marxist lens, rather always a Marxist lens or a class lens, I I have same critical approach that, the argumentation, and the dialectical method, not just empiricism. So I think Marxism remains, and many Marxists, also some non-Marxists, as you pointed out, like, Nasser is one of my favorite people as well, despite many flaws. Kemal, some aspects of the resistance he led, some of the developmental policies he introduced, modernity he introduced, some of the cultural things he introduced in Turkey at the time, they were really, really brave and courageous. I was just pointing out a certain thing. But yeah, I mean, many such people, Nehru, also with many flaws, but some of his contributions to secularism in India and liberal democracy, especially his treatment of Muslims and his, public stature. He would publicly could call himself an atheist, and his mother tongue, he said, is Urdu. For last about 1.5 year, 2 years, Modi himself and his entire BJP project, they are targeting Nehru. They are trying to prove that Nehru was a traitor. So that makes him even more likable, at least in my case.
I remember once I was on a plane to Delhi from New York, and I didn't know, but I was sitting next to a major funder of Hindutva. This guy was a part of that young raft of NRIs or PIOs living in the Bay Area of the United States, vastly wealthy, massively conservative, hugely invested in Hindutva, brutally anti-Muslim, and of course anti-Pakistan, Bangladesh. Anyway, I realized on this occasion, I cannot speak to this man. Or rather, I cannot listen and he can't listen to me. So we had hours and hours and hours and hours of this tension because stupidly I had found all these things out about him by saying, so what do you think about Hindutva? It's terrifying, isn't it? This is 2 decades ago, before I realized how important United States-based South Asian money was for the extreme right in India. And I guess that's another thing I wanted to ask you about. The transnational links of the far right are things that are being talked about more and more, not just by old-fashioned leftists, but by the bourgeois media, which is waking up. The bourgeois media are waking up to the fact that there are these enormously wealthy think tanks, lots in Western Europe, lots in the United States, but all over Latin America, all over Asia, that have funding connections and ideological links. And I wanted to ask you about that non-parliamentary, non-populist, elite connection.
I would first point out the case of Pakistan as well.
Yeah.
Diaspora has been a huge sport economically, ideologically, and politically for Imran Khan's project, which I would say is a kind of Trumpist project. I avoid the term populist for Imran Khan because populism has become very, all over the place kind of term. We apply it for left wing and right wing and all kind of people. I am trying to actually, one of the projects in the future I have in my mind is a book on Imran Khan and his politics. Post-truth, middle class base and diaspora an integral part, full of contradictions. Likewise, India, the Indian diaspora is largely now the BJP supporter. Not just the USA, Canada is another very important link. So is England, also England, and some other European countries where you have large Indian diaspora, Australia as well. Yes, you are very to the point. Increasingly, the elites, the bourgeoisie, call whatever you want to call them, they are realizing this. And also, we need to sort of understand, I think in media studies, there is a lot of emphasis, but still restricted to media studies. not, traveling to journalized kind of knowledge among the people, how the technology, this modern technology, has actually transformed the character of diaspora. Now they live in a certain country physically, but they are, very much because of, and both kind of communications, not this daily electronic communication, but also the travel possibilities. I
Hmm.
mean, if you're rich, not someone like me, if you have enough money, you would have your breakfast in Lahore and your lunch in London or Paris, whatever. Okay. And then perhaps dinner in a third country. It's that close. Those were the days. If you leave Africa and end up somewhere in the Arab world, then you never go back. So this technology has really transformed the character of diaspora with a lot of dimensions. You yourself have briefly written and talked about it here and there many times. Many other scholars have written about it. Uh, just one thing that I want to say is, like, not just India, like the broader Muslim world, which I know better, and Pakistan, you have this kind of phenomena everywhere. Turkey, Erdogan won one referendum thanks to the diaspora votes. He lost in Turkey marginally, but then the voters in Germany, who should have been enlightened people, but and the absurdity of it all is that these diaspora people from Turkey, Pakistan, India, they want to live in secular Europe or kind of secularist North America, but they want Hindutva in India, they want Sharia in Turkey, they want Islamic system in Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Yes, quite. This is one of those interesting moments when ideological, political, economic, and personal lifestyle elements are not necessarily coordinated. And I think it gets back to the anecdote you told, incredibly valuable, of the serving of red wine and the toasting of the Queen by the Pakistan military. That this to me is why the kind of Marxism we need is part of what I think has an influence on you, which is a truly materialist analysis, which is to say, you don't have to privilege an industrial proletariat as the agent of history. You don't have to neglect or ignore slaves, a caste system, women, sexuality, religion, as somehow or other not part of the story. Their material lives are things that are both conditioned by political economic forces and must condition our understanding of the use of Marxism, it seems to me. And I think that's a very important part of your work. But also, the Raymond Williams idea of there being residual, dominant, and emergent hegemonies. It seems to me that that historicization is incredibly valuable when we're thinking about these ideological elements. I want to have a swimming pool and a girlfriend and a fleet of cars and live in Europe. I want my parents' country of origin to be powerfully religious and, and sectarian. And I believe in God. These things are in some kind of complex dynamic, right? And part of what needs to be done, it seems to me, and it's hard to do, it's dangerous to do for some people, is to expose these intersections, expose the contradictions, expose the corruption, to show that people like Trump are hypocrites in their appeal to the white working class because they are of and for very traditional elites. And this is, I think, one area where religion may be deeply felt, but is also a cover to persuade ordinary people to support far-right perspectives. I wonder what your take is on that.
I fully agree with you. And also, I big reason that BJP or Imran Khan, in the case of Pakistan, with all their contradictions, I won't talk about Trump, American politics. I've never been to the USA, and my understanding is official. But these two case studies I can speak about rather with some sort of arguments. Well, one big reason is, well, I think both the supporters of Imran Khan and BJP, they understand to larger extent these hypocrisies. There are few problems that are there. One big problem is also the lack of alternative. There is no alternative. If we look at the rise of BJP, before BJP, Congress was also doing the soft Hindutva. And then if you look at the present India-Pakistan conflict, when I point out that, look, CPI, CPM also lent support to the war. They had the same viewpoint. So if you all have the same viewpoint, if you are all anti-Pakistan, then one would go for the most authentic anti-Pakistan, because CPI, CPM were not anti-Pakistan in the past. Congress also wavers here and there. Sometimes Congress wants to be friends with Pakistan every now and then. The most authentic anti-Pakistan is the BJP. Likewise, on neoliberal policies, on so many other things, on caste question, if you keep betraying people over and over again for decades and decades, then the most authentic fundamentalist would win. Likewise, in Pakistan, I think the Pakistan case study is very interesting. In the previous elections, 2024, the elections were rigged to keep Imran Khan out of power. He was definitely the most popular politician in at least two provinces. Now, Pakistan has four provinces. The problem is, if you win the largest province, just one province, you get the majority. So this impression globally that Imran Khan is very popular all over Pakistan is actually flawed. He's not popular at all in Balochistan and Sindh province. And even in Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, there was a complicated picture, but definitely he was popular. However, in 2018, rigged to bring Imran Khan to power and to keep Nawaz Sharif out of power. At the time, Nawaz Sharif was more popular, who had been prime minister for three times. Okay. From 2018 to 2022, Imran Khan and his party was, very pro-military. They were very anti-India. They were very pro-USA. All that, everything that the military says, Imran Khan supports, and was very proudly saying, look, I have no problem with this great general heading our army. We are like the best friends. So were his followers, who are very much like Trump followers. After the overthrow of Imran Khan through a vote of no confidence, the PTI people, they became the most anti-military people in Pakistan. They knew military rigs elections. They knew military intervenes in economy, military in bed with, at least everything, and left people knew it. But their interest was on the other side. This is like one understanding of it. The other is, of course, the lack of any project. There was this, Imran Khan is also a product of a mass urban movement in 2007 for democracy against the dictatorship of General Musharraf. Whole new generation wanted some change, some betterment. You can call it a sort of Arab Spring-like situation in Pakistan. Well, the working classes and peasants didn't join, but the youth, and Pakistan is largely now an urban or a para-urban kind of. They, and they pinned hopes in Imran Khan, sometimes hoping against hope, as we say in English. So the situation is much more complicated. I think if we have a better project on offer, say a leftist project, which is kind of, a modern left project, the kind of project you were just talking a while ago, taken into account, because Pakistan is not an industrial country. I mean, the traditional proletariat perhaps would be 1 or 2% in this society.
Yeah.
So you have to take into account the ethnic question, national question, women. Women question is very acute here. In every university I go in Pakistan, it's mostly girls there. 80%, 70% students are women. So it's a huge question, and many want to work. Likewise, the question, it's a young country. Perhaps 60 to 65% of the population is below 30, 35. So they wanted another kind of project, but what was on offer was Imran Khan kind of project, not left, unfortunately. So it's more complicated. It's not just, the kind of superficial picture painted in the mainstream liberal kind of Western media outlets such as New York Times or Guardian even. I won't call it very leftist anymore, at least.
I have one more question for you, if I may, Farooq, and then to close, I'd like to give you the opportunity to say anything more you wish to add. Does that sound okay?
Yes, I think I would like to speak about the university system, at least at two levels. One, at the global level, it is out of my personal experiences. I think it is very difficult to get jobs in the Western academia if you have my kind of views, if you do not have networks, if you do not have academic kind of background, if the parents were not into Oxbridge and all that, it becomes, the racism actually, I in Sweden, I worked both in blue collar jobs and some very nice journalistic and other kind of jobs as well. What I realized when I started applying after my PhD, and I have some proof to it, someday I will, write about it. I never find time about the discrimination at Swedish universities in particular, where I have some evidence, luckily. You find more barriers, more kind of, soft racism hidden, which is difficult to prove at universities and think tanks and such places. So that is, one aspect of which was very discouraging for me, because I suffer largely because of personal reasons. My daughter has grown up largely, she's now 16, without me present in the home most of the time. Initially for my PhD, later on for my job, I'm away, so I'm absent. So it feels, very sort of guilty when I think of my daughter. Secondly, in the case of Pakistan and other third world countries, but universally, this neoliberalization of education, this is really destroying the higher education in countries like Pakistan, even in the West, but especially here in Pakistan. This is perhaps the worst thing that has happened to education system in general, but higher education in Pakistan. This turns students into customers. This turns teachers into service providers. The relationship that I used to have at my university and college back in the 90s, I wouldn't pay any fee. Education was free. So very good relationship. Even if I won't like a certain teacher, it was never, animosity, disrespect, and all that. Presently, I must please my students. Like you should, customer is always right. You should give them good grades. You should agree them even if they are not very argumentative during the class debates. You should crack jokes to make them laugh. They may feel bad in the morning because the university begins very early. I'm not speaking about definitive students in my own department or that department, but the general atmosphere.
Mm.
And above all, the exclusion of a wide majority of the working class and middle class young men and women. They do not have, their parents do not have money to pay their fee. So I think some of the gains, even if we had Kemals and Nasirs and Saikarnos, at least they provided free education, free schools. So what you were speaking already, that has been denied. This neoliberal turn in education is really something that makes me sad. Makes me sad every day I come to my office because I teach at a so-called very good private university. I think of millions of young people, and I travel. I'm invited to public universities. I happily go there. The students from these universities, they stay in touch with me. So I know how difficult it is for them to pay even half the fee that they are supposed to pay there, and they feel excluded from good universities. That's what I think I should highlight.
This is a tragedy. It's a very international tragedy, but especially in the case of the global South and relatively poor nations, where the systematic exclusion of ordinary people and the continued elevation, the parthenogenesis of oligarchies, is an appalling trend and a tendency we see everywhere. But to end on a note of hope, your journalism, your editing, your YouTube channel, and I'll include a link, provide inspiration to many of us, whether we be experts on the topics you write about or not. You illuminate both within your own countries, Pakistan and Sweden, and also internationally. And I appreciate that lens, and I really appreciate your taking the time to talk with us today.
Thanks a lot. It was an honor and pleasure to speak to you, Toby.